Have you ever lost something that you couldn't find and you looked everywhere or you didn't even have the ability to find it? Have you ever had something happen to you where you couldn't even take care of yourself and you had to have help from somebody else? I had both those things happen at the same time once, a long time ago. I was only 21 years old and I was traveling the world. I lived in Korea for a year and then I wanted to go around and see the rest of the world. And one of the places I wanted to visit the most was one of those Greek islands. You know, you see the pictures where they have white buildings and blue sea, and they look so beautiful, and you just want to jump in the water there. That's where I wanted to go. So I took a plane and a train and finally a boat to get to this little Greek island of Naxos. And I found those little white buildings and I found a room to stay in for just $1 a night. It was really cheap. And I wandered around the village and I found some children who were friendly and they took me swimming and I explored. It was so beautiful. And on Sabbath, I thought, I'm going to go to a village on the other side of the island. I took a ride in a bus and I got there, and here was a beautiful little village on one side. And then there was this big cove of water in the middle. And over on the other side was a mountain with some cliffs. And I thought, what a perfect place to spend Sabbath. I had a bag with me and it had my Bible and my money and my traveler's checks, everything that was really important. And I put that over my shoulder and I thought, I'm going to go climb out to those cliffs and I'm going to spend Sabbath reading my Bible out there. So I did it. It was kind of stickery getting out there, lots of rocks and lots of stickers. And it took me quite a while to get there. But finally, I was out on those cliffs over the water. I was climbing around to find just the perfect place to sit and read my Bible. All of a sudden, my bag slipped off my shoulder and it bounced right on the ledge where I was standing and right down into the water. And it was quite a long ways down. It was like 40 feet down. That's almost as far down as a 4-story building. And I looked down there and I thought, whoa, that could have been me. And then the next thing I thought was, what am I going to do? I can't get down there. It's too far down and it's straight down. And that's everything I need to travel and get back home in my bag. So I thought, I guess I have to go back to the village. And I started praying, please, God, help me get my bag back. Then I scrambled through the rocks and the brush and the bushes, and I climbed around to where the cove was along the beach and to the village, and I found a teenage boy wandering around who could speak a little English. And I told him I lost my bag in the water. He went home and he got his dad, and they had a little boat, and they got in their little boat, and they were going to paddle across the cove to the cliffs and see if they could get my bag. But you know what? The water was rough. There was whitecaps and there was wind, and it was so rough the boat couldn't travel across there. So the dad and the teenage son came back to shore. I was waiting for them. They were so kind. They took me home with them. They fed me some lunch and they introduced me to their wife, to the mom, and to the sister. And then they gave me a room to stay in. And pretty soon, the brother and the sister took me sightseeing around the village. They introduced me to all their friends, and they took me up on the hill to look at some nice places, and they took me over to the beach. And all the rest of the day, I just hung out with those kids and watched the water and hoped that the water would get calm so they could still go out and find my bag. But you know what? By evening, it was still rough. So I had supper with the family, and then I went to bed in that nice little guest room they gave me to sleep in, and I prayed, dear God, please calm the water. And the next morning, just at the crack of dawn, I was looking out the window of my little room, but the water was still rough, still covered with white caps. It was still windy out there. And I had breakfast, a lovely breakfast with that family. You know what they ate? They had tomatoes from their garden and green beans from their garden and big, square, thick loaves of bread, and it was so delicious. And it was even better food than I had been eating if I was just on my own traveling. And all day that day, the children in the village took me sightseeing and swimming, and pretty soon everyone in the village knew that this American girl lost her bag in the water. And as I walked up the streets, the doors would open and people would invite me in, and they would offer me food to eat, and they would offer to lend me money so that I could get back. And pretty soon it was like everyone in the whole village knew about me, and they were all interested in taking care of me. And all day long I watched the water, and all day long it was still rough. And evening came, and the bus driver came looking for me. He was worried because I didn't come back to his village. And he found out about my bag, and he said, well, I can give you some money that'll help you get back to Athens. And if you get back to Athens, you can go to the consulate and you can get another passport and you can go home. That sounded like a really hard thing to do. I told him I wanted to stay here one more night and see if the water gets calm tomorrow. So that dear precious family with the 2 teenagers gave me supper again, and I slept in their beautiful little guest room again. And the next morning, when I looked out, the water was calm. It was like just glass, so smooth you couldn't believe it. So I had breakfast with my family. They were like my family now. And then they called their friends and they got a bigger boat. And I went with them, and there was a few men and my teenage boyfriend and me in that boat, and it just chugged right across the cove toward that cliff. Pretty soon we got almost up to the cliff, and my teenage friend dived into the water and swam around. And you know what? It was probably only a couple minutes, and his head popped out of the water, and then his arm popped out of the water, and in his hand was my bag. He found my bag under the water, and he climbed back in the boat and he gave me my bag. Then everyone cheered and clapped in the boat, and then they honked that boat horn all the way back across the cove. And all the villagers were lined up on the wharf watching and waiting to see if they could find my bag. And pretty soon they heard the boat horn honking, and they were yelling and raising their hands and clapping and cheering. And the whole village was happy for me that they found my bag. And they took it and up onto a roof. It was a nice, hot, sunny day. And we opened it up, and they took out my Bible. It was really thick and wet by now. And they laid it out on the roof to dry. And I had a letter in there I was writing to my mom and dad. And it was only half written. They laid that out on the roof to dry. And they took my passport, and they laid that on the roof to dry. And you know what? All the ink in my passport was just fine. Only one visa got washed away. It was my Japanese one. I was all done with that one. All the rest of the ink, all the other visas were just fine. Laid that out to dry. And when that letter dried that I was writing to my mom and dad, I told them, I finished writing on it, and I said, lick this paper, because it was salty from being underwater for 2 days. For several hours, all my things dried on top of that roof, and everyone was happy for me, and I was happy too. And God heard my prayer, and He answered it. And it makes me think of a couple of verses in the Bible. One of them is in Psalm 86. Psalm 86, verse 7, it says, in the day of my trouble, I will call upon you, for you will answer me. That's exactly what happened. I was in trouble. And you know what I found out? My trouble was their blessing. They loved helping me. And some of those dear people wrote to me for 5 years after that, because I became like their family. And they had a good time helping me. I did not want to be in a position of needing help. I wanted to travel around and have everything be fine and successful and good and easy. But you know what? Sometimes we have trouble. And then God sends people to help us. And they get blessed by being able to help us. The other verse it reminds me of is in Matthew chapter 25, and there's a few verses here. Remember, Jesus is talking to the people, and he says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the holy angels with him, he's going to sit on his throne, and he's going to divide people like a rancher divides his sheep and his goats, and he's going to put the goats on the left hand and the sheep on the right hand. And he's going to say to them, he's going to say to the sheep that are on his right hand, come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom that's all prepared for you from the beginning of the world. And he's going to say, because I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. And those people are going to say to him, when? When did we see a stranger? When did we see someone who was hungry and we fed him? When did we see you when you were thirsty and we gave you a drink? When did we see you when you were a stranger and we took you in? And then he's going to say, the king will answer them and say, truly I say to you, just as much as you did it to the least important in the whole person in the whole world, you did it to me. And when those people gave me food to eat and gave me water to drink and gave me a place to live and took me in as a stranger, they were doing it to Jesus by doing it to me. Don't you love that? Don't you love that you can be like Jesus when you help people too? And when you need help, the people that help you are being blessed by him for helping you and being like Jesus.